So, hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today for this virtual faculty office hours session for biology. My name is Grant Sewell. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an associate dean in the Office of Admission, and really I'm delighted to be here with you today and learn a little bit more about not only the academic program of biology, but more about Reed in general. And to be able to do that, we're joined by one of our wonderful faculty members from the biology program, and I'll pass it over to Sarah in just a quick second. But to kind of just give you a rundown of what we hope to be able to do, we will talk a little bit, or Sarah will talk a little bit about, the program itself and kind of giving more of a bird's eye view. But we also know that there might be questions that you're, curious to know about, things that are on your mind. And if you do have questions as we're going, the Zoom chat box is probably a great place to just kind of ask those things. And when we're able to kind of finish sharing that information, we'll turn our attention to the chat and speak to as many questions as we can with the time that we have. But with all that in mind, I will go ahead and turn it over to Sarah for an introduction and to get us started.
Thank you so much, Grant. Thank you, everyone, for dropping in today. My name is Sarah Schaack. I'm a professor in the biology department. I'm getting over a cold and cough, so my voice is a little bit husky today, and I'm sucking on a throat lozenge so that I can try to make my words come out for a whole hour. I've been really saving my words for class the last week or so. But I'm really happy to be here. I have done this kind of event prior springs, and I think it's such a great way to get a glimpse of what the academic program would be like if you come to Reed, and more general things about being at Reed as well. I've been here for 2011, so almost 15 years now. And I've advised students who've gone through Reed in many different ways. As we'll talk about in a few minutes, there's a lot of ways to major in biology. I've also seen bio majors of all different flavors go on to do tons of different things with their biology degree. So I'm happy to talk about any aspect of that arc, both like what students do and experience and choose between while they're at Reed, how they spend their summers while they're at Reed, and then what we as faculty and staff do to support students once they're done at Reed and they're making the step to that first job or to another kind of experience, or thinking and preparing for the next educational chapter for them. So I'm really open to your questions. And as Grant said, if you have a quick one and you want to put it in the chat, that's great. If later people want to unmute and ask them, you're also welcome to do that. I'm happy. I'm open to all forms of questions, and I definitely don't want to monologue the whole time. So please ask your questions, and I won't miss any of them. I told Grant to make sure that I don't miss any of them, but I'm pretty good at monitoring the chat. So I'll get started with just a quick overview. At Reed, Reed is, I think, well known for a lot of the different strengths in our academic program, but one of them is certainly biology. And the subdiscipline that I specialize in, evolutionary biology, there's a truly uncanny number of very famous evolutionary biologists that went to Reed College for some reason in my area. So I was really drawn to come to Reed for that reason initially, not having been from the West Coast. I was a first gen college grad. But now that I'm here, I know a lot more about the program and the ways in which students in evolutionary biology, of course, my subdiscipline, but in all of our disciplines, have tailored their bio degree to do what they would like to do with it. So I'll give you a few examples. A student can come to Reed and be a bio major with no adjectives, and that has some degree requirements. There's some classes at the intro level that are required. There are some classes at the upper division level, the 300 level, as we call it, that are required. And then, of course, one of the one of the best things about Reed is that every student, not just bio majors, every student gets a protected time in their senior year to do a thesis project. And that's a one-on-one mentored research project for the whole year that they do either in collaboration with a faculty member on something the faculty member has maybe worked on in the past, or depending on the student, something very different than what the faculty member does for their scholarship. And so my job at Reed is to kind of help students. I love teaching at the intro level. I'm teaching a lot of students who are not bio majors at the intro level, as well as students that are going to go on to major in biology. And then at the upper division level, I'm teaching genetics, genomics, and evolution in my case. And we have 12 biology faculty that are teaching in their area. So that's another, as a faculty member, that's a really attractive thing about being at Reed. I don't teach photosynthesis. I don't know anything about photosynthesis. I never studied photosynthesis deeply. I haven't learned about photosynthesis since I was in college. You don't want to be learning about photosynthesis from me. You want to be learning about evolutionary genetics from me. So all the faculty in our department are teaching at the intro level in their area, and then they're teaching at the upper division level in their area, and then they're mentoring student research either in the summers for students that want to do summer research, and and during that protected thesis year, which everybody does. So the quote unquote regular bio major takes a number of classes across subdisciplines and completes the thesis project and goes on to greener pastures. If you're interested in biology, but you're also really interested in chemistry, we have a standing program that kind of combines biology and chemistry. It's called Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. It is shortened to BMB, Biochemistry, Molecular Biology, BMB for short. And it is a standing interdisciplinary major with chemistry. If you wanted to, you can do what's called an ad hoc interdisciplinary major with biology and any department. So if you see a connection between biology and anthropology that you want to spend your undergraduate time pursuing, you can do an ad hoc interdisciplinary major. You have to write up a petition. It's a 1 to 2 page explanation for why you're designing this major, and work with an advisor to think through what would be the right course requirements for this major. You would end up doing an interdisciplinary thesis with a main advisor in one of the two departments. In this case, it would be, if it was biology ad hoc with anthro, you would be doing a thesis with a biologist, but your anthro component would be overseen or would be advised and mentored by someone in the anthro department as well. And we have students who do ad hoc interdisciplinary majors with a wide variety of departments, some of them expected, like bioanthro is a very common one, but some of them unexpected. There have been ad hoc interdisciplinary majors with biology and music, for example, and there are certainly more common ones and less common ones. You don't have to feel like you're inventing something from scratch if you do one of the ones that's quite common. But if you want to invent something from scratch, that's also a possibility. You can also minor in things at Reed. Many of the departments at Reed have a minor that they offer. Biology does not have a minor, but you can major in biology and then you can minor in any of the departments that offer minors. Another on the color wheel of different ways you can major in biology, another option is to be an environmental studies biology major. And that means you are actually a participant in a college-wide interdisciplinary program in environmental studies that has a cohort that graduates every year. And all the members of that cohort are environmental studies majors, but they each have a home department in one of 5 departments that participate in the environmental studies program, one of which is biology. So we call those majors ES Bio majors, environmental studies, ES Bio. And they take a bunch of bio classes, not quite as many as a bio major, because they also have these interdisciplinary classes that they take with their environmental studies cohort. Bio major standing interdisciplinary majors like biochemistry and molecular biology, ES Bio, which is a standing program. You don't have to petition to major in that. And then the last one I'll say, we have something that's called Alt Bio. It's not an alternative. It's a biology major, but there's one option that you can choose instead of taking 4 semesters of chemistry, which is a requirement for the bio major. You only take 2 semesters of chemistry, but then you declare a different department as your allied department, and you take 6 semesters in that department. So you basically are saying, I don't want to take organic chemistry, 2 semesters of organic, because the kind of biology I'd like to study doesn't depend heavily on organic chemistry, but it does, for example, depend heavily on math. So I'm going to take 6 semesters of math as my alternate field to organic chemistry. And it just says bio major on your diploma when you graduate. So when you come to read initially, you don't need to know which of these flavors of biology that you might end up pursuing. Usually your first year, any type of bio major is going to be taking introductory level biology, and you can learn and suss things out and see what appeals to you. And by the end of your sophomore year, you would declare one of these flavors of biology or something else, if something else ended up catching your interest. And then you would fulfill the specific requirements for that particular flavor of the major. So I've said a lot of words already just about choosing a biology major. I think the last thing I'll say before I ask if there's any questions about this in particular, one of the things I've mentioned that's special about Reed is the protected thesis experience for all students. The other one is the level of intentional and personal advising. So I meet with each of my advisees multiple times per year in a discussion kind of like this, except for one-on-one, to talk about what classes they want to take, to talk about their goals, to talk about what they might major in, to talk about what they might do if they major in X versus Y, to talk about study abroad and how that's going to fit in with their major requirements, to talk about minors and whether or not they just really love English and they want to take a bunch of English classes, or do they want to minor in English? And that academic advising, it's not technically, it's not a class, it's not teaching, it's not something that we can really write up in the brochures, or you can't really convey on the website even, but it is one-on-one conversations like the one we're having today that I think really make coming to a smaller school worth it. I mean, there's lots of opportunities at really huge schools, and those are wonderful. This is one of the opportunities for being at a small school, and it is also really wonderful. Does anyone have any questions about the majors or, what it would be like being a first or second year student? Can you talk a little bit more about the environmental studies biology program? Yeah. So the environmental studies program it's not environmental science. It is environmental studies. So the participating departments, are biology, chemistry, history, political science, and economics. So those 5 departments each have faculty members that are economists, but who teach classes explicitly as part of the ES program, who are chemists, but they teach classes that are explicitly part of the ES program. And let me be clear, if you're not an ES major, you're still able to take any of those classes, but there are certain ones of those classes that are required if you are in the ES program. And for an ES bio major, you're taking some bio courses, some ES courses, which are these usually multi or more likely interdisciplinary courses that really are combining politics, economics, science, history together, including the kind of flagship course of the ES program, which is their junior seminar. And their junior seminar includes a group project where you're going out and talking with people in the public, stakeholders. You're developing a management plan for either an outdoor site or a organization, managing a natural resource or a spill or something like that. I haven't done one of these projects before, but that junior seminar, and that's bringing together every ES junior that year, regardless of whether they're ES bio or ES chem or ES econ, they're all in that class together and they're all learning shoulder to shoulder, which is a really, I think the ES students really love that interdisciplinary aspect. But if you're ES bio, you also will have a very strong, very deep grounding in biology as well. Is there a specific major path for pre-med and biology or B&B? Great question. We don't have a specific path for pre-med, but all the major bio-majors that have advisors in biology, we are all familiar with what the requirements are for pre-med. They largely they're very similar to the B&B, the biochemistry and molecular biology major requirements, although the B&B requirements are more numerous than the requirements for medical school or dental school or pharmacy school. So if I have a student who's interested in being pre-health, I'm happy to advise them. There's a few people who are technically pre-health academic advisors. They're in the biology department, but anyone will be happy to advise you and anyone can advise you. And we'll talk through making sure that you take the prerequisites for whatever health program you're interested in pursuing after Reed. But I would never advise someone to be a B&B major simply because they wanted to meet those prerequisites for a health related graduate program, because there are like 3 or 4 extra classes in B&B that you don't need for pre-health. B&B is really, if you're interested in biochemistry and molecular biology, be a B&B major. If you want to do pre-health, one of my thesis students this year, who's a biology major, she's applying to med school next year. She has met all the requirements, but she's not a B&B major. Do I think that microbiology would be most related to B&B? Microbiology, we have a microbiologist on the faculty. You can take microbiology whether you're a bio major or a B&B major. Either one is fine. You can take microbiology if you're an ES bio major. It's an upper level class, a 300 level class. So usually something you would take sophomore, junior, or senior year. But any biology, you have to have taken the introductory level biology as a prereq, but then anyone can take that class. How many biology majors are there generally? How many theses would a professor usually advise each year? We have about 40 seniors per year, I would say on average in the bio department, but it's more. Oh, I forgot to mention an important flavor of biology. We also have a neuroscience major, which is a standing interdisciplinary major with psychology. So that's a major that has its own requirements. It's an amalgamation of bio and psych classes. There's also a chemistry requirement for neuroscience. I should have mentioned that in the many flavors. So when you ask me how many bio majors there are, because there are so many flavors, it's a little bit of a hard number to give you, but I would say about 40. And how many theses does each professor have per year? On average, I think most of us have 3 or 4 thesis students per year. I have a very big boat this year. I have 6 thesis students. And so I actually, I'm not teaching one of my regular classes because I have so many thesis students and I want to give them the time they deserve. And that's a college policy that if a faculty member has 6, that they actually don't have to teach one of the regular courses because they're going to be advising so many theses. And the thesis projects are exciting and interesting and they take a lot of time. And it's such a big part of the learning at Reed to do this project. Could I give you some examples of senior thesis projects? Absolutely. I'll just give a few examples from my cohort this year. I have a student who's I work on an animal system called Daphnia. These are aquatic microcrustaceans that live in mostly freshwater systems like ponds and lakes, not really in rivers and not really in oceans, but they're microcrustaceans. you may or may not have heard of them, but they're very common if you were to go take a sieve in a pond and pull up a few gallons of water and let it strain through, you would very likely find Daphnia in many ponds and many lakes throughout the world. And I work on this system. And so a lot of the students who do thesis projects with me will use Daphnia for one of their common uses in biology, which is they're a model system for testing the toxicology of pollutants in our environment. So one of my students is looking at how two very common pharmaceuticals that have very long half-lives in water affect Daphnia. And she's looking at them in isolation, each of these pharmaceuticals in isolation, and then she's looking at their interaction, since they're both so prevalent in water systems that they're also often found together. And no one has ever looked before at, they've looked at the effect of one and they've not looked at the effect of the other, and then they've never looked at the effect of them in combination. And one of them is a diabetes drug. So there's a lot of hypotheses about what it would do to an animal like Daphnia that, it's very similar, actually, what it does to Daphnia, what it does to humans in terms of glucose uptake. And the other one is an antidepressant. Like I said, they both are in our water systems from wastewater, and they persist for very long periods of time. So her project, I think, is a great example. It's interesting from an environmental perspective. It's interesting from a biological perspective. She's looking at the effects on how many babies they have, their survival, their longevity. She's also collecting tissue, extracting RNA, and looking at gene expression changes in a bunch of key genes that are known to be in some of the pathways that are impacted by these two pharmaceuticals in humans. So she's looking both at phenotypes that you can measure with your eyes, and then she's doing a lot of molecular biology to see what the impact is. And you might think to yourself, who cares what these pharmaceuticals do to this aquatic microcrustacean? But Daphnia is the organism that the EPA uses to test the effects of pollutants in water to decide on policy. So a lot of people actually care what the impact is. And Daphnia in aquatic systems are the grazers. So there's algae that's growing in the water, then Daphnia and other invertebrates are eating the algae, and then vertebrate systems like fish are eating the Daphnia. If Daphnia are negatively impacted by a pollutant, it really has lots of implications for the stability or collapse of the aquatic system. So that's an example of one of the thesis projects in my lab. And Daphnia are a cool system for projects because you can do a pretty short-term exposure with any substance that you're interested in. In this case, my student went out and read the literature. What are the drugs that are staying in our water systems, and picked some of the top ones in order to design this experiment. I have the Daphnia, and I've studied Daphnia for 25 years, so I can help mentor that part, but I don't know anything about these pharmaceuticals. And then we work together to think through the data analysis, interpret the data, and she writes the thesis document. So that's a classic experiment in my lab. And I mean, I encourage you, if you have not looked, there's an electronic archive of the Reed theses that have happened in the past, and you can type in almost any keyword and someone has studied it or written a thesis on it. It's really fun to browse the electronic archive, or if you're able to come to campus, to go up to the thesis tower. We'll see if there's time later, and I'll give a couple other examples of thesis projects. There are other opportunities for research as an undergrad. Absolutely. All 12 of us typically have students doing research in our labs during the summer. I'll have 5 students in my lab this summer. People can also do independent studies, and this is where you design a project. You convince a faculty member that you want to learn something about a topic that we don't offer a class on, and you basically design an independent class to do research on that topic with the mentorship of a faculty member. And that's not super common. Not everybody does independent studies, but I would say It's not super rare either. And certainly it is almost, you could think of it as like a kind of like the thesis year experience, but it's only going to be one semester. And it's usually not, almost nobody does an independent study their senior year because they're doing an independent study already with their thesis. As a bio major, how many slash about what percentage of your classes would be strictly bio major focused, and how would space for other classes work? That's a good question. I mean, anyone who has taken the prerequisites for any class at Reed can take any class. There's nothing that's bio major only. So it's pretty rare to have non-bio majors of some flavor in the 300 and 400 level classes, but it's not never. And then in terms of getting for bio majors getting into classes outside of biology, I would say another advantage of going to a small school is that there's a lot of effort made to make sure that there are enough spaces in classes for student demand. I don't know of any student who's never, like during their 4 years, been able to get the classes that they want. I would say the hardest classes I've heard students trying to get into are the studio arts class docket. And that's because they are so limited in terms of, like, if you're taking painting, there physically can only be so many giant canvases in the room. And so maybe there's a cap in that class and it's pretty small and you might have to try a few times to get in. But no one is routinely not able to get into the classes that they would need for their major, for sure. And I would say even generally the classes that they want. Sometimes you do have to maybe be on a wait list, but we tend to go into the wait list when registration happens. Sarah, I'm so glad you're hosting this. I am so glad to be hosting this. You're interested in genetic engineering. From the research I did, it seemed like genetic engineering opportunities at Reed were at least not a well-trodden path. But do you think I could still get a good genetic engineering education at Reed? That's a great question, Booker. Genetic engineering is something that relies on knowing a lot of foundational biology before you get to the engineering part. So yes, I do think that we prepare students extraordinarily well for paths post-Reed. And I would say genetic engineering is something that you would typically study at the graduate level, not at the undergraduate level. It probably is possible to find a university where you could major in some kind of bio/engineering. But I would worry about that path, honestly, because the foundational biology that you would want to have would be so important prior to doing the engineering part. And in terms of getting exposure to using CRISPR or making a construct or cloning in the bacterial sense of the word, which are the foundational skills for doing genetic engineering, yes, we do those things at Reed in our classes and in our independent studies. What's the general path of a bio major at Reed? For example, what classes do students generally take freshman year, sophomore year, et cetera, to fulfill biology requirements? So we have 2 courses in the first year called Topics in Biology. It's intentionally open because it depends on who's teaching in the class each year what topics, but it's generally intended to give about 6 weeks in 4 subdisciplines to everyone who's taking those 100 level lab lecture courses. And the vast majority of bio majors take those 2 semesters in their first year. They might even take a third bio course if they were really keen. I teach a 200 level non-lab course in evolution, and I have a first year student who took topics in biology with me last semester and is now taking evolution with me this semester and is also taking the second semester of topics in biology this semester. So they're taking 4 classes this semester: humanities, Hum 110, which every first year student takes, chemistry 102, the second semester of chemistry, bio 102, the second semester of bio. And then they added a 4th class, my evolution class, which is a discussion based class for majors and non-majors. And that I would say is not everyone doesn't do that, but that's like a keen. I really can't wait to start taking more bio classes past the 101, 102. In the sophomore year, students really go any number of paths. We don't have that many 200 level classes. So sophomore year, bio majors will start taking 300 level classes in whatever subdisciplines they're very excited about. And I don't want to list off all the 300 level classes that we offer because I think there's about 15 of them. But if people are really interested in cell bio, they take cell bio, animal behavior, developmental biology, microbiology. My class is genes, genetics, and genomes, vascular plant diversity. So whatever courses, and most of them, you can take animal behavior before development, or you can take development before animal behavior. Certainly with conversation with your academic advisor, they will probably nudge you towards some of the classes that have fewer prereqs, or I usually advise students to take a genetics class in their sophomore year because genetics is so foundational to so many of the other classes. So there are maybe some preferred orders, but there's not a prescribed order with those 300 level classes. And you would take, I would say on average, one per semester, sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. That would be more than what you needed for the bio requirements, but that's very common to take more classes than the minimum. And those 300 classes would be all typically lecture and lab classes. And then we have another 15 courses that are at the 400 level that are more specialty topics. So for the 400 level, my class is on mobile DNA that moves around. That's what I study. So that's what I teach at the 400 level. Then that's a class, there's no lab, but we're reading papers from the primary literature and we're discussing them. And each faculty member teaches one of those 300 lecture lab courses and one of those 400 level classes in their specialty, like their uber specialty. And other than years when we're on sabbatical, all those courses are offered every year. And there's one or two people on sabbatical per year. But during a student's 4 years here, you would be able to take any of those classes that you see in the catalog that we offer. There was another question there. Did I answer that question, Sophia or Sophia? About the general path? I'll come back if I have not. What percentage of bio majors go to graduate school? Okay, great. Many. We have the highest rate of STEM students going on to graduate school, not just bio, but STEM of any school, basically. Like there are different charts that have come out over the last 10 years that look at the window from maybe 2017 to 2020. It's in the past a little bit in order to analyze the data, but a lot of students go on to graduate school. I have a great example. I had a student who was a thesis student in my lab 10 years ago now. She did an experiment with Daphnia and hypoxia. She was a very ecology-focused student when she was at Reed. And she went after Reed and worked at the Broad Institute at MIT, which is a genome sequencing-focused center, for like 4 or 5 years. She worked there for a while. And she was an amazing biologist, picking up lots of skills working at the Broad, but was going to seminars and talks and got really interested in neuroscience after Reed and decided that she wanted to go to grad school in neuroscience. Took a few prereqs that she had not taken while she was at Reed because she had never taken any brain focused classes when she was here. She was an ecology focused student and then applied and is now in a PhD program in neuroscience. So there are some cases like that where students, much like the person who asked about genetic engineering, student knows what they kind of want to do long term, and they're kind of preparing for that already throughout their time at Reed. There are many more students who do not know what they want to do later and who use their time at Reed to explore and build foundations. And then there are a third category of students, which are students that thought that they knew what they wanted to do and prepared for that while at Reed, and then changed their mind either during Reed or after Reed and did something else. And we have seen it all and really enjoy hearing all of those paths in the choose your own adventure of life. And I've had students, I had a student who was my thesis student, did an amazing thesis. We published a paper together. He went and worked in biotech, and he's now in like the Silicon Valley genomics. Like, I don't even know what he does because it's all proprietary. He can't really tell me about it. So it really is, there's so many paths out there, and I'm happy to give more specific examples, but it is not, the limit is more what you can think of and dream about more than what is available to you. What teaching styles are most common in bio at Reed? I would say there's a lot of lecture lab courses where the lecture, it's not, you just sit there in a huge lecture room. It's the upper division classes are between 10 and 35 students in the room. There's a lot of think, pair, share, and interactive activity that happens even during lecture, but it is a lecture. And then labs, meet once a week. They're 4 hours long. They're extremely interactive, and almost all of our upper division classes, if not all of them, about 2/3 of the semester is devoted to labs that the instructor, the faculty member, has developed to expose you to different questions and techniques. And then usually 1/3, or sometimes 1/2 of the semester, you do design your own experiment and you implement the techniques that you've learned in the first half de novo to a new problem in the second half. And we really do emphasize getting the experience with thinking about developing a question and the scope of the question and how to approach it, how to design the experiment, how to deal with messy data, how to troubleshoot when things don't work, how to make inferences from data that you've collected that no one's ever collected ever before. So the research, going back to that research set of questions we talked about before, the research experiences that you have both your senior year or if you opt to do research in the summer are not the only research experience you would have, because in our classes, we're weaving that into every single one of the classes, I would say, except for those discussion courses at the 400 level where you're really talking about research, but you're not doing research. What is Reed's relationship with organizations who offer internships in Portland? Or more generally, what are some outlets for Reed students to gain experience in environments similar to a possible career in biology? So that's a great question. The Center for Life Beyond Reed, which is abbreviated the CLBR, Center for Life Beyond Reed, it has a ton of support and resources to help students who might be looking for jobs or internships during the summer or after graduation. But faculty do a ton of advising and connecting of students with our networks with jobs and opportunities outside of Reed. So I had a student who came to me 6 years ago. He's obsessed with diatoms. Nobody at Reed studies diatoms just by chance, but I have a really, really good friend at the University of Arkansas who studies diatoms. And so that student, Eli, was my thesis student, but his whole thesis project he did with my colleague, my friend who studies diatoms. So I was kind of the person on the ground. I read the drafts. We talked about the data, but the data set that he was working with and the techniques that he used, he learned from this person off campus. So having an off-campus thesis advisor with an on-campus advisor kind of liaison is possible if there's something that you want to do that we don't do at Reed. And our partnerships with other institutions in Portland, like the Oregon Health and Science University across the way, which is a behemoth research university, are numerous. And we have lots of students that do thesis projects there, that do summer work there, or that get jobs there after graduation, either for a couple of years while they're figuring out what they want to do next, or long-term, or go to graduate school there in addition to going to graduate school other places. I have had one thesis student of mine go on to do a public health degree at OHSU. I have another student this year who just applied to do public health at OHSU, and I have at least one student that I can think of that went to med school at OHSU. So we have a lot of connections with OHSU, which is, like I said, behemoth. Fewer with Portland State or some of the other small colleges, but it's not because we couldn't connect. It's just because you haven't come yet to connect us with them. Did that answer your question, Milo? About the connections? Okay. I've been reading online that students who want to go to med school are more likely to be accepted if they have a diverse path, not just bio. If I chose something other than bio and just did the requirements, would that be acceptable or recommended? As long as you meet the prereqs for medical school, you can major in anything. And I have definitely, I haven't had any advisees do that because my advisees are all bio majors, but I've definitely heard of students at Reed who majored in classics and took all the prereqs for medical school and then went to medical school. So yes, that is possible. Is it advisable? If you want to study classics, yes, it is advisable. And if you do that and you also meet all the requirements for med school and you go to med school and you are engaged with med school, you're going to be a tremendous asset to your patients for bringing that depth and breadth to medicine. So med school doesn't really care what you major in as long as you meet the requirements. But I would say that example of a classicist going on to med school is not common. And I don't think it's because it's ill-advised. It's just because most students, when they're meeting all the requirements for med school, are wanting to take electives. They want to take they want to take courses, and our classics department has been renamed recently GLAM, which stands for Greek, Latin, and Ancient Mediterranean Studies, GLAM. If you want to take GLAM courses, you can do that as a GLAM major, but you can also take your electives in GLAM and more than just your electives in GLAM for your distribution requirements, which are the general college requirements. And many people are happy doing that. You mentioned interdisciplinary, and as for whether that's a strategic way to get into med school, I'm not sure. I haven't read that same thing that med schools are looking for people who have gone those less trod paths, to borrow a phrase from someone earlier in the chat. You mentioned interdisciplinary majors a while back. Do you have any familiarity with those of a wider scope? You briefly mentioned biomusic. I'm wondering about bioart or biohumanities major could work. Bioart, I've seen multiple times, more often than biomusic. We have in the art department, one of the newest faculty member in the art department, Juniper Harrower. You should look her up if you haven't already. She got her PhD in biology, and she is an artist and is amazing and does just incredible work at the boundary and mixing those two things. So yes, absolutely. I'm trying to think of with other humanities. I haven't seen many bioreligion, but I did have an advisee ask me about that just last week. Bioanthro, as I mentioned, is very common. Biohistory is not very common, but I think that's because most people who want to do something like that end up doing ES bio, so they can have a lot of conversation with the history department through the ES, or they end up being ES history, so they can have a lot of conversation with biology through ES. Same with poli-sci. There's a lot of people interested in both of those, but they would do that often through the ES program because it captures a lot of what makes them interested in both of those disciplines. But yes, an ad hoc interdisciplinary with any department is possible. You just have to develop the rationale with your advisor. And like I said, the minors is also another way to deeply explore those other disciplines. Have I seen any examples of CS bio interdisciplinary majors or computational bio theses? Absolutely. We have a computational biologist in our department who's a bio faculty, but who has her PhD in CS. And then many people have done things that were very bio CS border. Most of them usually major in biology and just take a lot of CS courses, or major in CS and just take a bunch of bio courses. I haven't seen that many formally design an interdisciplinary program because they're able to take the classes and they haven't cared too much about the title, but it would be possible. If someone double majors at Reed, do they complete 2 theses? Yes, which is why very few people double major at Reed. You have to do 2 theses. And that's a lot of theses to do. 1 thesis is a lot to do. So very rare. I have seen it. The student I'm thinking of was biophilosophy, double major. But again, because you can take a lot of bio courses if you're a philosophy major and vice versa, most people just do that and don't do the 2 theses. How do bio majors complete study abroad? These are fantastic questions, by the way. Are there specific programs that go with the bio requirements? There are many programs that are very bio rich in their offerings. And if I'm advising someone who wants to do study abroad that is very bio intensive, I usually suggest they start by looking at those programs. Most of them are offered through the School for Field Studies, which is abbreviated SFS, and you can find their programs are all over the world. They are not all 100% biology, but many of them are very heavily bio focused. But bio majors can go abroad to any of the approved programs and transfer their financial aid for that semester to that other endeavor, to having that semester abroad. And you don't have to do that and take bio courses. And in fact, I would say most biology majors that I've advised that go abroad do not try to do a bio adjacent program or a bio focused program. They have, maybe not most, I will say maybe it's 50-50. 50% of them, I think, go to SFS because they want a biofield experience and they want to do that intensely. The other 50% do not go to University of Cape Town or University of St. Petersburg and study bio courses. They go to those places and they do non-bio courses largely, and they bring those units back towards their major, but they're happy to fulfill, and they can fulfill all of the major requirements, even if they spend that semester abroad and don't get any biology credits during that semester. That is not to say that they can't take biochemistry at University of Cork. You can. It's just often they're studying abroad because of interests other than their biology interests. And so they pursue those other interests fully while abroad and then kind of deepen their biology coursework the other 7 semesters. But yes, study abroad. I am very pro study abroad. Study abroad changed my life. And many of us are happy to help you figure out a 4-year plan that includes a semester abroad, usually sophomore or junior year. It is possible to even do it your senior year. And you might be wondering, oh, what about the thesis? If you need to, you can petition to do a 1-semester thesis if you're going to be abroad your senior year. Many students don't want to do that. They want the full year thesis experience. So I would say the vast majority of students do their study abroad their 2nd or their 3rd year, those middle 2 years while at Reed. And it's not like we have a program where I take students abroad. If you're going to study abroad, you will be studying abroad at a university abroad, and that those units will come back to Reed. And there's all the programs on the International Programs Office webpage have already been visited and vetted by Reed faculty, and they have courses that will transfer in if you select those programs. If there's some program that's not on that list that you're interested in doing, that's still a possibility, but then you have to make sure that the credits will transfer back into Reed. And it's like one more step to do. So most students select from that list. I had the joy of going to review the programs in South Africa and Botswana 5 years ago, and sitting in on classes, making sure that the course offerings are kind of on par, so that we can say that if you go do the study abroad, that we will be able to, you'll be able to earn read equivalent units. You are so welcome. These questions really got to the heart of a lot of the advising conversations that I have with students while they're at Reed. A lot of them, later during the 4 years are more about what next, and that is, that looks different for everyone. And I really do. I mean, I know that students are thinking about that even before they select a college, but that really is something that your time in college will also help illuminate. And you'll learn so much in these new courses and in this environment that even if you think you really have your heart set on something, you might find out that there are things that you didn't even know exist that are going to be exciting and that you'll be passionate about a year from now, or 2 years from now. So I encourage you to strongly consider whether if you're bio forward in your interest, if you can see that any of these paths speak to you, and if any of you have specific questions because you did not hear what you're looking for in the descriptions I gave, I'm happy to, over email or on a one-on-one Zoom, have a conversation if I think I could help you envision whether we have the path that you're thinking about here, because I can't tell you all the paths I've seen in 1 hour, but there are many, and it really is the most rewarding part of being a professor at Reed is to help students reach their potential. And I see often the biggest growth in people that maybe even had the smallest picture of what they thought it was that they could do. Thank you. Thank you for thanking. I did a lot of field work in Uganda. And in Uganda, when you say thank you to someone, often they will say, thank you for thanking, which I really love more than you're welcome.
I think you spoke to a lot of those wonderful questions that we had, Sarah, and being aware of the time, I probably will wind us down here, but I want to offer a tremendous thank you to Sarah for spending some time with us, really answering a lot of questions, speaking about the biology program, but speaking about Reed just more in general and like what our students do here and what they do beyond their time as well. But hopefully we'll see you at a future event. I know we'll have more conversations with different departments. There'll be chances to hear from current students and student panels and conversations with the college president. So definitely a lot to be on the lookout for. But with that, I want to say thank you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you coming today. And please, you look up, my last name is in my tag there, and my email address is just my last name, schaack@reed.edu. And please do feel free to follow up with any questions that you might have, and I'm happy to answer them. Thank you, Grant, for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye, everyone.